quarterback, I'm going to make a point to you here. My next guest, before I bring him on, Joe Theismann, I'm going to say this to you, that Joe Gibbs is the greatest coach in the history of the National Football League. I'm going to tell you why. He took 3 different quarterbacks to the Super Bowl and won it. No guy in history has ever done that. Here's one of those guys and a former MVP and our dear friend, Joe Theismann. That's where I put him, Joe. I put him, I think his feat with taking you, Rippon, and Williams, the Super Bowl titles. I mean, I know that Belichick has, look, 6 titles, hard to argue with it. But, Joe, 3 different dudes, 3 different mentalities on an approach of the game. It's quite a statement when you're talking about what Joe Gibbs brought to the NFL.
Yeah, it really is. You think of Joe, you think of Bill Walsh is another one. Offensive sides of the ball. Andy Reid, offensive sides of the ball. Certainly being a part of it. And I was very fortunate to be, I guess you could say, his first. Really, we went to a Super Bowl the second year he was the coach. And we went to a Super Bowl the third year he was a coach. I think the thing that makes Joe so special, and I don't disagree with you, Dan, if your assessment of him, is his ability to adapt and adjust, both in-game and in the off-season, creating opportunities for us, being able to always be the sort of the tip of the spear when it comes to be able to be very creative with the offenses. We see this, in Philly, you got the tush push. You see what Andy does with his offense in Kansas City. The scripted plays, not the stuff that Patrick does unscripted. That's just phenomenal anyway. But I tend to agree with you. I think the system really was in place, and we just took different advantage of it. Doug had an incredible receiving core. I had Big John. Rip carried over a little bit of what Doug had. And so Joe had the ability to say, okay, this is what I have. And this, to me, is great leadership. Let's see what we got. Let's see how good they are at what they do, and let's give them opportunities to make plays. And the guys that I played with were able to make plays a lot.
You know what, Joe? I think you guys were also ahead of the trend where you guys were like, I think your group could play in today's NFL, and here's why. You guys could go in the open market and find guys who people thought had run out of gas and there was nothing left in the tank. All of a sudden, they show up in Washington. Now, maybe this goes back to George Allen and what George did when he brought all those guys in. But to me, you guys just found these players, and they were like gap fixers for you guys. It was ahead of its time in a way.
Well, it's interesting.
I think it's a testament to your organization.
It is, Dan, and it's interesting that we're now at a time in conversation in the offseason where we're talking about the combine and we're talking about the draft, and that's where a lot of guys came. Russ Grimm, Mark May, Joe Jacoby, a free agent, just in the offensive line, and then you look at Dave Butts coming over from St. Louis. The thing you have to really keep in mind is there wasn't free agency at that time.
Right.
It wasn't a question of going out and saying, okay, we're $90 million under the cap. Let's go get this guy. Let's go get that guy. Now we've got to work our quarterback's contract in a way that it would fit into what we really need to do as far as the pieces of our football team go. That's what I think made it so challenging for Bobby and for Joe, was how do you find the right person to fit in? And you know what? So much of it is, yes, a lot of guys have athletic talent, but how do you find the right person to join your football team, the right kind of individual in the locker room? See, to me, the thing about the combine, it has nothing to do with how you jump, how you run, how you throw, how much weight you lift. It has to do with that 20 minutes or so or half hour that you sit down and you let somebody know what kind of a person you are. I guarantee you more guys have been drafted because of their person than they have simply because of what they did at the combine. Because if you're a professional football team and you don't have an idea what these guys are able to do by now, you're really not doing a good job.
I'll tell you what Rich McKay told me and why they drafted me in the 3rd round. He goes,
you're talented. You're an incredible talent. I know that. I've had this conversation with Rich. He said that the guy was phenomenal. He, all the things that we thought about him, he exceeded them. I know that.
Hey, well, really? Hey, Joe, He asked me the question, so if you don't make it in the NFL, what's your plan B? And I went like this to him. I go, well, Rich, I'll tell you what, if you got a plan B, you ain't got a plan A.
Yeah. Amen.
And he went like this. Okay. And
Check that box. That's right.
And it
That's
really
right.
did, like you said, Joe, to me, I think the drills and all that stuff, I think it's not factored to me.
It's TV. Got to have a TV show. We need a TV show.
I think it's the interview.
Yeah, we need a TV show. Let's and so I mean, yeah, you like to see guys run and throw and do that kind of stuff and lift weights, but I mean, how many offensive linemen are going to run a 40-yard dash? Really?
Hey, Joe, I know this. Once you get to
how
the
many
NFL,
quarterbacks?
no one runs 40-yard dashes anymore.
No, I'm saying, I mean, it's a little bit like the Pro Bowl or the Pro Bowl games as they are now versus a game. I think you really get the true evaluation of someone when you look at them play against high-level competition at the collegiate level. How do they react to pressure? Are they able to bring the team back if they're down? How do they handle being ahead? In and out of the huddle, accuracy, timing of releases, footwork, all that stuff you get in a game situation, I think is really a way you can evaluate people.
Joe, so far with Josh Harris as your owner, how's he been? What do you think of him? How is the organization shaping up? Just to give a little small synopsis on what you've seen. I know he's at the combines, part of the interview process. Just give me a take on what you see with him so far.
I've had a chance to sit with Josh and visit with him, and he and Mitch Raines both, Mitch Rails, excuse me, both those guys have really done a terrific job of integrating themselves into the NFL. He owned the Sixers, the Devils, so he's been involved in other professional sports. Of course, Magic brings the basketball element to it as well. But I think Josh has really immersed himself into understanding professional football, understanding the game, understanding what his football team needs. And I don't see him as the kind of an owner that's going to say, I think we ought to take this guy or I think we ought to take that guy. He believes in the people that he has hired to do the evaluation process, but certainly he wants to be there. Heck, you paid $6.2 billion for the franchise. You should be there to be able to evaluate what the people that you hired are looking at and the direction that this team wants to go. The other thing too is, besides Dan Quinn, you got a new offensive coordinator. Defense with Dan there, that's they're going to be hand in hand. They're going to walk lockstep. But as far as the offense goes, what's Cliff going to do? I mean, what's he want? What fits into his system? That's why I've sort of been thinking, maybe Caleb Williams might be the choice because he was at USC. But then you look at the statistics and the numbers that Jaden Daniels put up and you go, wow, over the last 2 years, those are some phenomenal numbers. Now, maybe the CJ Stroud athleticism and the way he played last year will be a determining factor in the direction, let's say, that the Commanders want to go at the quarterback position. I don't know anything. I'm putting that disclaimer out there right now. I have no idea what they're going to do, but I'm like everybody else. I'm very curious.
How about this, Joe? Do you think it was by design that they would have two former head coaches handling both sides of the football, where you have Kingsbury that, again, think about it. Here's a guy that was in the NFC West. You're in a division with Kyle Shanahan, at the time Pete Carroll, and you're talking Sean McVay, and he wins 11 ball games with Arizona. We all know what Arizona is. Yeah. And he had Kyler Murray and developed, of course, Patrick Mahomes to have one of the top offenses in Lubbock, Texas. I don't know about you, but Texas Tech is not a bastion of quarterback. So he comes to Washington, and to me, it looks like they're going to give him, like you said, the autonomy to be able to run that offense. And then on the other side, it's Dan Quinn, one of the better coordinators, helped the team get to the Super Bowl with Seattle and also put a team. Was that by design, Joe?
I don't necessarily think it was just by design. I'm sure they had conversations about it. But Dan, if you look around the league now, just about everybody you hire has had head coaching experience because there's been so many of them that have been relieved of their position and have gone back to be coordinators. I don't even consider the term head coach an applicable term in the NFL anymore. They're head administrators. Yeah. You have so many responsibilities besides coaching that occupy your time that when you go back to becoming a coordinator or you go back to a position coach, I think it's almost got to be refreshing to some. Not that you want to get fired, but I think it's a little bit refreshing to get back to your roots and get back and get your fingernails dirty and get into the game the way you did that allowed you the opportunity to get it. And of course, the way we're changing head coaches, you never know if that merry-go-round and that brass ring is not going to be sitting there for you again.
Absolutely. Is Sam Howell the guy?
I think we'll see. I mean, Sam, I think, took an incredible beating this year, gave up either the most or second most, was sacked the second or the most sacks in the NFL. That doesn't count the amount of times you were hit.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones had some time off, so he didn't take as many as Sam did as far as giving up sacks go. But I think he's a tough kid. He's, proved his mettle. He made some decisions like all young players do with the ball in his hands that he wishes he had back, I'm sure. But I think last year was a very invaluable year for him to be able to grow and learn. Remember, we look at different quarterbacks. Zach Wilson in New York wants out. And I don't think the Jets is a good place for him anymore, to be honest with you. I think getting out would be a good opportunity. But look what happened to Geno Smith when he wound up in Seattle, finally found a home. Look at Baker down in Tampa, finally found a home. You never know where that synergy between the offense that you're going to run, the coach that's coaching you, and your abilities all come together to allow you to be able to become what everybody thought you might have been when they drafted you.
Joe, is that a new thing you think? Because back in your day and my day, if you didn't make it a quarterback, you were pretty much done. But now you look at the Ryan Tannehills, the Geno Smiths, and like you said, Baker on 3 or 4 different stops, all of a sudden he throws for 4,100 yards, 28 touchdowns. You're like this. Wait a minute here. So maybe it really is where you're drafted, Joe, and where you're at. Like, look at Justin Fields in Chicago. That's a graveyard. I talked to Tom Thayer yesterday. It's a graveyard of quarterbacks. And here's a stat for you, Joe. In Green Bay, do you know in the last 32 years that 97% of the snaps have been taken by Favre, Rodgers, and Love?
Yeah.
97% of the snaps by 3 dudes in 32 years. That's phenomenal, and that's why you have consistent winning. Is this a new thing now we're seeing now with guys finding the right place and the right situation? They could turn their careers around.
I think so, Dan. I also think that the fact that we don't have that many quarterbacks in this league. I think this past year, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around 67 different quarterbacks started this year. I think it's somewhere in that neighborhood. So you see guys getting hurt. 17 seasons is a long time. That's why there's no preseason. Those games are purely to evaluate rookies and free agents. They're not there to evaluate starters. The first 2 or 3 games of the regular season become the preseason games where you get your conditioning, where you get more familiar with the offense, where you get comfortable getting hit. You get comfortable hitting people. So this is where it's all changed so much. But I really feel like there's different opportunities out there for different guys. And, like Ryan Tannehill for me, nobody's talking about him. He was a starter for what, 3-4 years? I don't know, 5 years.
Pretty effective.
He left Miami. And all of a sudden now, Will is there. And what are we going to do with them? They're free agents. You cite what's happened in Green Bay. You can go back to obviously the 49ers as well with Joe and Steve and, Jimmy a little bit. And now with Brock, looks like he's going to be there a while. And then look at Washington. I think in 85, when I got hurt, to where we are today, almost 40 years later, 40 different quarterbacks, 41 different quarterbacks.
Wow.
Cleveland over the last 15 years has had the same kind of a situation. Finding that one guy that can be your quarterback, not just from a talent level, Dan, but from a health standpoint. And I tell young guys this all the time. Your number one responsibility is to stay healthy enough to be able to play and practice so that you can develop your skills. Because you can't play 3 games and wind up sitting 4. You can't practice 2 days and wind up missing 4 or 5. It just doesn't work that way. The only way you get better is taking snaps every day in practice, every day in a game. And then you sit down and you study and say, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? And be dead honest with yourself.
Needs in the draft, Joe, that the Commanders need, in your opinion, where do they need to strengthen themselves?
I think they're in a unique situation because of their cap room.
A lot of money.
$90 million under the cap, I believe, is the number I've been hearing. So, and there are some pretty good offensive linemen out there. I think that's certainly an area that you want to consider with all the sacks and problems they had last year. Would definitely be a place where they want to solidify it, maybe upgrade in different positions. Don't know exactly where they are. I think they're fine at wide receiver. Running back, running backs are the guys in this league that get absolutely no love whatsoever, nor money. They get neither one of those,
right?
To be honest with you. I think probably linebacker is a place they want to maybe look at. D-line, we traded away two of them, Chase and Montez, and got some pretty good draft capital there. So you might want to add a little bit there. You never can have enough corners because everybody runs 4 and 5 wides now, so you really need that. And and maybe the safety position, someone with a little versatility, be able to swap down and play the slot if they have to, but somebody yet that can come up and tackle. So if you do go 3 wide, 4 wide, you still have somebody who can make plays and not have somebody run for 50, 60 yards against you all the time. So they certainly have areas where they can improve. I think not only just the starters, but from a depth standpoint. Again, I think, Dan, that people just don't really think about how important the 12th, 13th, 14th game is going to be and who's going to be on the field. Who do I have on the field in week 13 when I have to win the next 2 or 3 at every position? And it seems like some teams you lose 3 corners. You lose 2 or 3 offensive linemen in a span. And do you have somebody that able to come in and fill in? And now with the new leagues, the new league, you almost have a farm system, which is great. It's great to have a place to go to say, instead of signing literally some guys off the street, you take them off of a roster that they've been playing through the summer, and look at the coaches that are coaching. They're all NFL quality. So, you're getting that training in a little bit of a unique way to be able to have somebody help you finish the season. I always look at the offensive line, Dan.
I tell people
healthiest offensive lines are the ones that finish.
Absolutely. And Joe, I tell people all the time, war of attrition, and do you have the quarterback? If you have the roster and the quarterback, you're going to get it done. I want to ask you about Jalen Hurts and Kellen Moore. And from what I'm understanding, from what people are going to say about Moore being hired as a new offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, he's not going to change the offense. But what they're going to do is they're going to try to accelerate the 23 style of offense. And Joe, I'm against that because you signed Jalen Hurts because he's a dual threat guy. Last year, they almost existed. They completely just took out and wiped out the RPO on one of the things that made him an electric player. Everybody's got a unique quality. They took one of the unique qualities away from him, and they ran far fewer RPOs, and it resulted in more passing attempts and 18 turnovers. And so to me, why would you go away from what made him great to try to accelerate something that maybe he's not capable of doing, and that's win from the pocket?
Well, I think, Kellen was in Dallas with Dak, right?
So we're going to get a better version of Dak?
I don't know. Are we going to get a better version? I think we might get a similar version. I think you'll see more of the RPOs. I think I'm sure they don't want to expose him to injury any more than he's been. I think that was one of the things that happened this year pretty much. I think he was exposed a little bit more. I think he can protect him a little bit more with those. But it's he's got somewhat of a similar type of an individual to work with that he had in Dallas. And I think that'll translate well for both of them. As a coordinator, you know what you're looking at. And as a quarterback, you're sort of getting back to where you had the success. I think if you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, their problems this year didn't lie as much with, the inefficiency of the position and the turnovers as it was the fact that they had everybody peaks and then you start to fall off a little bit. And then your older players don't quite play at the same level they did just the year before. I thought Philadelphia's defense 2 years ago was special.
Yeah.
They weren't special this past year.
No. 70 sacks 2 years ago, and this last year they were one of the worst teams in passing.
And to me, that's that number. I look at that football team and I say that's number one. That was the number one biggest difference is they look like an older football team this year, and I think that contributed to where they were.
2 last questions for you, Joe, and it concerns Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. In your opinion, when you look at a guy and from what everyone is being told, it seems, or how about this, the behavior and the language it's being talked at the combines in Indy, it looks like post June 1 that the Broncos are going to move off of Wilson. To me, Mike Tomlin would want a veteran guy versus a Justin Fields guy, or do you see it differently? Because to me, I think a guy like Mike Tomlin could squeeze the last bit of greatness out of that guy in that winning organization. The Steelers don't traditionally do this, Joe, but that's an organization that you and I know since 1969. Joe, they've had 3 head football coaches, been more popes
I know.
and
55
presidents.
years. 55 years. Mike Tomlin, 17 years, never having a losing season.
Insane.
I mean, it's just it's a credit to the organization. It's a credit to the Rooneys. It's a credit to the coaches that have been there and the players that have played for those coaches. Russell Wilson, he can't stay in Denver. I listened to some of the interviews, and he's saying all the right things. And this is, Russell understands PR. He great city, would like to stay. He knows the organization is going. Look at the way the season ended. I mean, how could you come back from that and play for an organization? I think it'd be good. We talk about Zach Wilson moving on. I think for Russell, it would be a great thing. Now, what's he got left? Does he have to learn a new system? You want to look at systems that are somewhat similar to where you've been so that the learning curve isn't quite as dramatic as you might think. And like I said, you don't have a lot of time to learn anymore. There's a limited amount of time in the offseason when you can spend with coaches to be able to go through OTAs, to go through mini camps, to go through that modified version of a training camp. But I think Russell will be out in Denver, and that's a team that has to look. In Chicago, I would not throw Justin Fields out the door. I would consider, because of the picks I have, and I'm thinking that there's going to be a deal made up there somewhere. I'd be surprised if Chicago just keeps the 1. Maybe they move back with New England. But of the 3 guys that are there, who do you really want? Which one is head and shoulders better than the other one? I'm not sure if there is one. I think you can live with any one of those young guys. And there's a few, Bo Nix is in there, JJ's there. So you've got other people that you could possibly get. I would draft a quarterback and bring him in and compete. Justin's not going to cost you a lot of money right now. That's the important thing too. You look at the quarterback position and the economics that gets tied up in the position. You don't have that in Chicago. So you have a little bit of flexibility in that regard as well. But I would consider taking a quarterback, possibly, maybe moving back 1 or 2 spots and see if somebody wants to jump up. I mean, are the Giants at 6? Are they thinking they want to move up?
How about Washington going to 1, Joe? How about Washington going to 1 and then going to 2 and getting Marvin Harrison Jr.? And then you got Moore and Harrison up there, and you give the kid a fighting chance in Chicago with some tools. And Washington's got Caleb, who worked with Cliff at USC. I mean, to me, that kind of makes more sense.
Your thinking is not wrong. I've run that scenario in my mind as well. But I look at Jaden, I think, is it Caleb or is it Jaden? It looks like Drake is, sort of the other guy right now, which, we're talking 1A and 1 3/4.
Right.
Okay. That's basically what we're talking about as far as the quarterbacks go. But, I think there's certainly a possibility. And it's the draft. It's the NFL. All of a sudden, from nowhere, here comes somebody. Here they come. They're going to, they're going to pounce on up. What's Minnesota going to do with Kirk and their situation up there? Are they comfortable with, the guys that they've got playing up there? Is Gardner Minshew in Indianapolis? Is he the guy, or are they considering someone else down the road? Competition isn't a bad thing at the position. If I was making the decision in Chicago, I would give Justin another year. I always have the ability to trade him the next year. If he has a good year, hey, it could be Geno Smith. It could be Baker Mayfield. You just don't know. You've invested a lot of time in developing this young man. No question his athleticism is incredible. He just has to be a better thrower of the football. If he becomes a better thrower of the football, he can be pretty darn scary in that offense.
I completely agree with you, and I would stick with him too. Joe, thank you for your time. I saw you on Fox News the other day too, man. You were spectacular as always.
Thank you.
You're always so good. Everyone loves when you come on the program. Thank you so much, my dear friend. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Dan. Thanks for having me. Take care.
You got it. The great Joe Theismann, former NFL most valuable player. We so appreciate him coming aboard. Absolutely spectacular. Hit the like button. Please keep it here on the National Football Show.